Hello Retro Gamers, and welcome to another episode of Retro Game On. Today we're taking a look at Toy Story, released for the Sega Genesis and Mega Drive in 1995. Developed by Traveller's Tales, who are notable for a lot of games, but most recently a buttload of LEGO titles, and published by Disney Interactive Studio. Do I dare make a PewDiePie joke? Am I expected to be relevant considering my vintage content? Anyway, let's not beat around the bush about the actual issue here. Movie-based games are usually balls. But to be fair, Disney-made games, those in the early 2000s at least, usually weren't half bad, and this does have the added bonus of being developed by Traveller's Tales. I mean, come on, they did make Pugsy after all. Toy Story follows the plot of the movie remarkably well. Each mission in-game has very clearly been based on parts of the film, with there being not too many deviations. I feel that I don't really need to summarise the plot, but if you've never seen the film, then it's based around a bunch of toys owned by a kid named Andy. More or less the leader of the pack, the favourite toy is named Woody, who exists as a pull-string cowboy toy. His perfect little world is thrown into disarray, however, as on the day of Andy's birthday, Buzz Lightyear is introduced. He's a Space Ranger action figure or something, who becomes the favourite toy, making Tom Hanks a sad sheriff. This game came out about 5 years before MPEG cutscenes from the relevant movie came standard, so the storyline is progressed by nice little interludes that include screenshots and a bunch of text. I quite enjoyed these though, I found them charming if anything. Toy Story is a platformer for the most part, however, plenty of extra levels are thrown in to resemble the big games of the time. How about Micro Machines for example, or Outrun, or even Doom? Let's start off discussing the platforming levels though, as they make up the main base of the game. The gameplay is fairly standard spec as far as mid-90s platformers go, although the sprite of Woody is abnormally large. What he's capable of is also fairly basic, since his only weapon and form of attack is a whip, that only stuns but not destroys I should add, and a pathetic jump that only grants him access to low-lying objects. I appreciate that the low-level jumping leaves the level designed to all sorts of exploration as you need to find a route to get to a particular place, but the simple attack and large sprite causes a few problems. If you've read anything at all about this game, then you know it has a bit of a reputation for being difficult. This largely has to do with the big sprite, pun not intended, as your pathetic leap carries you all over the level. Since everything is so large though, it's hard to tell what you're jumping into before you leap, but you can be rest assured that it's usually a health gulping enemy. And remember, since you can't actively destroy these enemies, since it is a kid's game after all, they will always be there. The stuns only last for 3 or 4 seconds, and from then onwards they're there to be accidentally run or jumped into, depleting your precious health. To further compound this issue, there is also a swinging mechanic that only works when it wants to. Many times I jump for a hook only for the whip to go in the wrong direction completely, which again usually ended with myself landing on an enemy. And really, you don't get a whole heap of health. There is an allowance of 5 points, but these can be really sucked up quickly in the faster paced levels, and the continues can be up to 5 depending on what you choose in the options menu. However, the game is split into 5 sections, and I don't know what it is with this game in 5, and there is a password for each one. So even though this can be quite a trying game, those continues and health points are reset once you go from a password, so eventual progress is definitely in the question. There are even checkpoints mid-level too, which is much appreciated considering they were non-existent in similar games of the era. And as a side note, I appreciate that the passwords aren't a long and nonsensical string of numbers and letters. They're simply 5 numbers in a row, nice and easy to input. Now, this review has been a bit of whinging and complaining so far, but there are positives. The difficulty spikes, no argument, are sucky as all hell, but other times the game is stupidly easy. These are usually the levels that are adding some diversity to the gameplay mechanics, for example the driving levels. Some are presented like micro machines, however there is no racing. It's instead a race against the clock of sorts, as the goal is to pick up batteries before the power runs out. These get a little bit trickier further into the game, but the difficulty is a lot more manageable compared to some of the platforming sections. This concept is again used in an Outrun type level called Daytona, which was actually exclusive to the Genesis, although this is probably the easiest of the bunch since you're not really going that fast and the road is also quite wide. The game again takes a total U-turn however, with a mission called Really Inside the Claw Machine. This changes everything to the third person in a 3D environment, which is the first for me personally on the console, where the goal is to collect all the toy aliens and deposit them back into the holding bin within a specified time limit. Again, not a very hard level compared to others, the absolute change in every way for the game is actually a pleasant surprise. I should probably add that even though some platforming stages are hard as nails, they are varied in their own right. They're not just collectathons for the stars for more lives. For one, an early level has you helping all the toys to safety in Andy's room before he enters and finds out that there is a mini civilization living in there. Another has you making your way through Planet Pizza and discarded rubbish, but having to play dead every time some lovely animated legs walk past. The boss fights are pretty good too, with one scene including a nightmare sequence of sorts with Giant Buzz attacking Woody. Even cooler is the fact that this was actually based on a deleted scene from the movie. Toy Story has great presentation and graphics. There are nice little touches like the Etch-a-Sketch at the start of each level listing objectives, but the main sprites and backgrounds are a real treat, which include nice and smooth scrolling. Taking on the style of Donkey Kong Country, all sprites are pre-rendered in 3D using silicon graphic machines. The animations are nicely formed and fluid too, the animations for Woody actually coming from Pixar themselves. While Toy Story is far from perfect, I have a lot of respect for all the different game genres it tackles, along with an overall attitude of changing the game mechanics constantly. This might usually be a hindrance, but I was always looking forward to the next level, just to see what the game would throw at me next. What's even more impressive is that this game was only developed in 7 months. It's for these reasons that I think this could have been a classic on the Genesis if it wasn't for those dang difficulty spikes. If you don't own a Genesis though, very similar versions also existed on the SNES and PC. There's also a handheld version on the Game Boy, although this is naturally limited.